All right, getting queued up here. All right, so I think everyone now should be able to hear me, hopefully, and see my screen. So those in the past who have done that have been able to raise your hands, perhaps. So if you're able to do that, I can see. There we go. Excellent, excellent. Always good to know. So we'll wait another minute or two and get cranked up here. At noon exactly Eastern time, so we'll give it another 2 minutes and we'll get started. Welcome, welcome. Another minute. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to everyone. So I'm Brian Klontz with Charitable Solutions, one of our monthly webinar series, as you know. So this month, as you knew when you registered, top 5 pros and cons, outsourcing both non-cash, gift annuities, and other stuff, both donations and some services as well. So we did this presentation on Tuesday as well, and so many of you know the housekeeping sort of notes here is that we do not send out the slides after the call. However, I will send out a link to the better of the 2 recordings. Tuesday's was pretty good, so we'll see how this one goes. And also, if you don't mind, if you could include any questions in the Q&A, it's just much easier to scrape those, and then I combine those with Tuesdays, and I create a little grid of the questions and then the answers. So to the extent that I'm not able to answer your questions sort of as we go, I'll definitely be able to do that and then send that out to the entire group. So I hope that's helpful. If there are any topics that anyone is interested in, we're sort of asking those now. I think we've done this maybe 20 months or so in a row, and still have 3 or 4 good topics coming. But if you've got any kind of charitable conundrum that involves tax and risk, that's what we get excited about. So if there's something like that going on, let me know, and we'll potentially queue it up or do some papers around it. So again, Brian Klontz with Charitable Solutions. We got a team of 25. I think we've got 2 or 3 members here on the phone today, which is always good. And so I will ask them maybe as they are able to check the Q&A or if the chat, ideally Q&A again, but they can maybe answer some of the things as we go. So with that, I'm going to just jump right in. So first thing is very briefly sort of about the firm. I've done a pretty poor job, frankly, in the past marketing all the weird things that we do. Most everybody that works with us will come in through sort of one door or window and not recognize there are other doors or windows that may or may not be sort of applicable. So quickly, then I'll sort of go right to left. We do emergency assistance fund administration, and in particular, I created a charity now about 11 years ago called the Emergency Assistance Foundation. We have about 350 large corporate funds. They average maybe between 30 and 40,000 employees, so pretty large ones. And we do global grants in that space for disaster relief and personal hardship. We also, as part of Charitable Solutions, do audits on existing independent programs, design, any kind of tax issues, something called Section 139 plans beyond the scope of this. But it all go to this sort of, again, charitable tax and risk of helping to provide a way of being able to get a tax deduction for contributions made to these funds, and then to the extent they meet qualifying criteria, the grantees, people impacted by the disasters or personal hardships, are receiving those grants tax-free. So I've been very interested in that area for a while and sort of built out some products and platforms around that. We have about 160 staff or so on that side of the equation, so sort of a different beast over there. What I'm doing today, and what many on the team do as well, are professional advisor, CE, board staff, nonprofit and donor speeches. So I had fun gallivanting or frolicking, I'm not sure which one, through southwestern Illinois last week for some community foundations, but do a fair amount of virtual ones. And again, other members of the team do that as well. So usually about 60 to 80 of these types of talks each year. Then I'll maybe jump to appraisals first. So Charitable Appraisals, about a year and a half ago, sort of launched this new business line, been growing quite quickly. And so I think we have one of our appraisers on the phone, Alan Bruce, if I'm not mistaken, and so he helps with any of the tangible personal property and collectibles. I think he dealt with a bourbon collection that was donated, and yes, everybody wanted to taste test it, so I've heard that a couple times, so, which I would say too. But we have 3 other appraisers, so I do cryptocurrency and life insurance appraisals. We have other members doing business interest appraisals. In essence, the tagline is, if it could be donated to charity, we can appraise it. So we do all the qualified appraisals for whether it's CRTs, outright. We're able to sort of perform that function, and probably 95% of our work are for charitable transactions. So really don't do much outside that, generally speaking. So then the next sort of 2 buckets would be sort of getting a bit to what we're talking about today, and that's sort of outsourcing. So one is where it's not outsourced, and with gift annuities, they might want some independent review and audit of risk on their existing program. So I've got 3 of those, I think, projects that I'm working on this week that I'm trying to finish it up today and tomorrow, today and tomorrow. So we do not a ton of those, maybe 25, 30 risk audits a year. So we have 2 actuaries on staff. We basically stress test pools, overlay different mortality tables, and so on, to be able to identify any potential risks and different ways of mitigating those. To some extent, if it's a very large gift annuity, we look at potentially reinsuring some or all, help with the brokerage design placement of those, done that last 20 years or so too. So anything sort of around gift annuity risk in particular, since the firm was started when I created it in 2003, we've done that in addition to the non-cash asset receipt and discount. So that's gift annuity risk. National Gift Annuity Foundation. So we have, I think, John Severson on the call here today. So we have a distinct team. It's a distinct foundation. So it's now the largest independent gift annuity platform in the country for outsourcing. So again, sort of what we're talking about today. There's good stuff and bad stuff, which we'll also talk about. But at least for those that have outsourced it, you can see we have about 330 charities that have outsourced at least one gift annuity, have about 630 or so contracts now, and approaching about 60 million in assets if the market will stop going down. But other than that, the whole point of that is that for charities that don't have a gift annuity program, or they have one in specific states, but they don't want to register in New York or California or Washington for obvious reasons, we're registered in all 50 states. Or maybe it's a person that's younger than their minimum, maybe it's larger than their maximum, maybe it's a real estate gift, which I spoke with a college today about, real estate for a gift annuity or S Corp. If otherwise they're going to say no, rather than saying no, they can outsource gift annuities over to the National Gift Annuity Foundation. We do all of the stuff. We're taking the risk, liability, and then 100% of the residuum is passed back as a grant to the charity or charities that the donor was trying to give it to in the first place. And the final piece is non-cash. All the same stuff I just talked about with gift annuities, we do with non-cash. So a very large flow of non-cash gifts. Primarily, these are outright major gifts, probably 98%. Real estate, business interest, crypto, any kind of non-cash, illiquid, complex gift. For those of you who have attended past webinars, we did about just under 1.2 billion in donations last year. 261 donations, took 1,900 referrals, but all of those referrals, were because they were declined by the charity. The charity then referred it to us, and of the 1,900, we were able to complete 261 of those transactions. We are doing all the sausage making, same stuff, all the things otherwise that they would do. And then when it actually liquidates, then we actually do not manage any liquid funds. Then that's being granted out most always 30 days after settlement proceeds are received. The point is it really functions like it's a donor-advised fund in all respects, but really it's for just this unique, complex asset space. We receive the funds, do all the compliance, all that sort of issues, and then the charity gets the cash. So last year, the average donation was $4.4 million. The average fee was 1.35%. Then roughly 99 cents on the dollar, a little less than that, is then going in cash to the charity or charities that the donor was trying to give it to. That's, again, an outsourced model. We do some direct consulting. You see here, right here, that'd be more of the Insource model. So we can consult if the charities are trying to take it on themselves, and we just charge an hourly fee. So hopefully that's not too much, sort of gets to the whole point of sort of insourcing versus outsourcing, pros and cons. And the key is, the mission of the entire firm, our entire team, is to make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't. And so there is nothing worse in my weird, geeky brain than if it's a good donor with a good asset wanting to do good things, and they're not able to do that because of various good reasons, logical reasons, of the charity not being able to take on a particular asset or within the time frame or risk other complexity. That is literally why we exist, to help capture those gifts, get the donors the full deductions as appropriate, and then having then the cash, like with gift annuities at the end, or like major gifts through the process of an outright gift, and then making the final grant post-sale. So that's us. Hope that's helpful. So let's jump to the agenda. So here we go. I think we're in good shape, right on time, thankfully. I can only yell at myself, right? So we're not co-presenting here, which is good and bad. So outsourcing defined, so I'm going to go through that briefly. Asset plan giving continuum, which I hope is helpful. I've had a couple people say it was helpful to sort of provide a framework or a context for at least how I think about these things. May not be the right way, but at least helpful for people to sort of understand where they are on that spectrum. Then plan giving outsourcing. So what does that mean in terms of the various things that can be outsourced? And I thought would be maybe most helpful is to include 10 specific real examples of questions that we get where situations come up that the charity's like, I got this question from the donor, I'm just not sure what to do. So I call that my little black book section. And so it's got a couple recommendations for various charities. Recommendations a little bit too strong. I'm not endorsing anybody, but it sort of will give you some flavor for what a triage process could be, and that's really the point here too. I am not pro outsourcing. I'm not con outsourcing, so I do think, and let me just say it right now, so I'm going to sort of jump on a little mini soapbox. I believe, I'm conflicted, I'm biased, whatever. I believe strongly that charities that say we're not going to outsource any of these types of gifts are making a gigantic mistake. Like crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Also, charities that say we outsource everything, I think are making an equally gigantic mistake. And there seems to be, my experience at 28 years, not perfect, but generally, charities are either A, we think we can do everything, we're going to build out all the plumbing and the capacity and the staff, and we think it's sort of an ego, and we feel like we should be doing this, and we're going to just sort of make this thing work no matter what. And then we're super risk tolerant, we're going to just make it work. Other charities are like, well, we're never going to do any of the plumbing or any of the staff or any of the capacity, and we just don't even want to have these discussions, we're just going to outsource everything. In my view, I think both of those are equally suboptimal. We'll say it that way, suboptimal. And I hope at the end of this brief webinar that you'll start to think about, at least the way that I think about things, and that is there should be certain things that most all charities, even very small charities, are able to do themselves and to sort of build out. But then there's also sort of this line of which it would not be as appropriate or optimal to do. And each charity will have a different line. But what I view things is on this continuum of if something comes in and looks like X, you handle it this way. If it comes in and looks like Y, you handle it that way. And so you can have sort of this decision tree of being able to think about what specific donors or their assets are being offered that at different points in time may be very appropriate to handle internally, and same situation, might be very appropriate to handle externally. So that's sort of my soapbox. So as we go through this, I want you to sort of think about the theme. I have a number of professional advisors on the call today, certainly a number of, obviously, most all charities. And so sort of think about, there's personal risk tolerance, there's departmental risk tolerance, there's leadership, there's board, sort of all these kinds of things. At the same time, you're trying to calibrate that with actual planning situations that would be optimal for the donor, either during life or at death. So I'll sort of shut up there. It'll make more sense as I go through, I hope. We'll see. So what is outsourcing defined? So let's sort of set up the sort of terminology here a little bit. So as you know, it's using an external party to provide assistance for something that's impossible, impractical, or inefficient, sort of suboptimal, to do internally. We're going to have some external partner help. I want to be very clear how I define it for the context of this presentation is it's not a vendor. It's not an agent. So this would really be a full punt option. So if you were to say, well, we're going to have an external party do administration for our gift annuities that we're doing internally, yeah, that kind of is outsourcing. That's outsourcing the administration. But in just to keep this simpler, I would say you're still really insourcing it. You're hiring them as a vendor or agent to perform that service. You could fire them at any point and then bring it back in-house. You could pick a different vendor and so forth. I would view that as more sort of for insourcing, even though there's a component. I get it. I'm really talking about outsourcing as the full punt of we're not going to do any gift annuities, so what do? We want to sort of have it go out, but then hopefully come back later in terms of those as an example, using gift annuities. So usually explored, I hope, sometimes it's not done this logically, I would say, but after completing some kind of sort of benefit cost analysis. If we were to do this in-house, what does that mean? What are the relationship costs? What are the actual hard costs? What are the soft costs? Sort of doing this internally, how does this fit within our mission versus wanting to have these kinds of assets or vehicles on the menu, and instead we might have some external party sort of performing those functions. So hopefully, again, the point is that there's some thoughtful, intentional process of determining sort of what is appropriate or inappropriate in terms of keeping in-house versus potentially outsourcing. And I've got a couple quotes at the bottom. You've already read these. These are kind of the annoying salespeople quotes from time to time. I'll go ahead and say it, but 10% of something's better than 100% of nothing. Okay. Usually that's said when somebody's upset. That's coming in a good context. I kind of view it, let's say the other way, is maybe 95% of something is better than 100% of something if you don't have to do any of the work. Maybe it's 99% of something, as an example. And then I'm sort of Shark Tank obsessed, kind of a fan of that show, and so Mark Cuban, every once in a while, if anybody watched the show, would say something like, look, 100% of a grape is not as good as 5% of a watermelon. So is there a bigger piece here, a bigger story that otherwise there could be a smaller piece is still better than getting the whole of a very small amount. So kind of saying the same thing of the 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing as well. That's how I sort of define it. Different people have obviously different definitions there. So here's the continuum. So this is the one, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I really want you to sort of think about what this means. And so if I'm positing that it might be appropriate for most charities to intentionally think about this benefit cost idea, and that my idea is that most all charities should be doing some of these things internally, but that most all charities also should be doing some of these things externally. That's just my sort of hypothesis or sort of point that I'm trying to make here generally. And so what does that mean? So I break it down sort of level 1 through 10. This would be maybe a slightly different level for different charities. So there's nothing here that's, where's your site for that? There's no sites in my head. So I just sort of brain dump. And how I view things, different charities might slot these around a little differently, probably not a lot, frankly. But we'll start with the first one. So there are some charities, they're 1.4 million almost now, crazy to even think about. But there's some charities that are just not comfortable taking in publicly traded stock. We know that. So they might say, I'm so sorry. I know you want to give us $100,000 in Amazon stock, but we just have not set up a process to do that. I'm so sorry. Can you just give us cash instead? Bad. So even if you're not taking that in, which should not be that difficult to do, creating your own brokerage account, providing the donor with the DTC electronic transfer instructions so they can send their Amazon stock to your account, then you can then sell for no capital gains tax. As you all know, there are, again, some charities, probably more than you might think actually, that have never done that process. They've never set up that account to be able to do that. So I would call that a level 1, that at least charities should be doing those kinds of things, generally speaking. Maybe not 100% of the 1.4 million, but a fair number. Now I'm going to have a little fun. And maybe you're like, oh, yeah, we can handle public stock. Really? Okay. So what if it's a stock that is restricted? That's public stock. It has 144 restrictions. Well, that's a little bit different. Right. Maybe it's public stock traded on the pink sheets, over-the-counter, in essence, penny stock. Oh, that's different. We might not be able to do that through our brokerage account. Well, that's right. What if it's public stock but not on a New York exchange? Maybe it's on an Australian exchange, which we have fun with from time to time. Oh, well, that's different. We don't normally do that. What if it's public stock but it's a certificate form? It's not able to be electronically transferred over. Now you've got stock powers involved. Now you've got these always fund medallion signature guarantees involved. Oh, that's different, right? Maybe it's a stock that comes in that's somehow subject to SEC reporting requirements, sort of from an insider perspective. Maybe it's stock that comes in that's super thinly traded, and yes, you can get out of it, but it'll take the next 8 years of your life looking at the volume every day to be able to get out of it. Maybe it's public stock that comes in that we get this question once a month, haven't done one yet, but we eventually will. That's cannabis stock. Our charity can take public stock all day, but we're not taking cannabis stock. That's different. So that might be something that could be referred out from some other charity that might be able to process any of the ones that I mentioned. So you can see here, I can create lots of permutations on any one of these assets. You're like, oh, that's going to be easy. Really? Give me like a minute and a half, and I'll tell you 8 ways that it won't be, because those are all the calls that we get. So the point is that public stock, what's a simple bequest? Generally, simple bequest is the personal representative or the executor sells the stuff and sends you a check. Get a check. You should be able to process the check. Now, maybe a simple bequest is an in-kind. You're actually getting this account that's coming over, or this real estate that's come over. That starts to change things really fast. But you get the point. Generally, most charities can say, we can handle public stock. Now you jump down to mutual funds. Mutual funds, not super complicated from a tax perspective, generally speaking, but from a open up a new account, organizational account, the mutual fund company, transfer the stuff over, that is not a 10-minute process. You have to do it usually each time for the various mutual fund families, et cetera, et cetera. So that can get tricky, maybe non-trustee CRTs. So you see the point. I'm not going to go through every one of these. You don't want me to go through every one of these. But the point is that I view everything on this continuum and like it's a swimming pool. And sort of the baby end of the pool, the wading into the pool, public stock, simple bequests. You start getting a little bit deeper, life insurance, residential real estate, commercial real estate. Then all of a sudden down at the bottom you got international real estate or environmentally challenged real estate all the way up at 10. We see and you see donors and planning opportunities with all of these kinds of assets and all of these kind of vehicles. This is not comprehensive at all. There are other situations that come up that maybe after this webinar, I have no idea. You'll go, oh, that's a level 4. A level 4 for you might be a level 8 for your next employer or your last employer or your peer's employer, or it might be a level 2. So each one of these are pretty fluid, and I'd also suggest let's make up residential real estate. I would call residential real estate for very large charities have good staff. Maybe it's a 2 or a 3. If it's your board chair's house that you can see from your campus with no mortgage on the 3rd green, that you have 8 people bidding on it before you even put it on the market. That's pretty straightforward. What about residential real estate instead, that you actually have somebody who's a tenant, this is bad to say, but we've dealt with this before, who's not paying, and the person who's not paying you need to evict. An eviction is a lawsuit, and 99.3% of the time, the person you're evicting, this sounds horrible, but I'm going to say it anyway, is most always a veteran who's won all kind of medals in something. So now you get the PR newswire, ex-Charity, who we thought was great, is evicting this war veteran who won the Bronze Star because he can't make the payments. Well, yeah, what are we supposed to do? Is he going to, basically be squatting for the next 15 years? We have a fiduciary obligation to protect the charitable asset, so we have to evict. That's what we're going to do. If we don't, the IRS comes in and saying, why aren't you protecting the asset? The flip side is that's not good either. All that's residential real estate. Let me go back to the board house example. All that sounds easy, right? Probably should be easy. So many charities, if you're going to start dipping your toe into real estate, that would be like the first little dippy toe step. That should be pretty straightforward. Maybe if you got that question today from the board chair, June 30th, middle of the summer, today, that might be, okay, we got a little bit of capacity here. This might be a good first one for us to work through, build the plumbing, as I mentioned prior. But what happens if you got the exact same question with the exact same board member with the exact same asset on December 15th? That's different. That goes to this accordion, where's my little thing here, accordion flexibility. Everything changes all the time. This is much more fluid than people think. I always see these gift acceptance policies, and it's just so black and white. This comes in, blah, 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 blah. None of that works. None of that works. Anybody that has gift acceptance guidelines, that's fun to put together, and the first gift that comes in never quite fits the gift acceptance guideline. I've done this a long time. It happens every time. And even if it does fit it, you might say Mary is a smoking good, smoking smart on real estate in June, but she's on maternity leave. So now what do we do? Well, now everything just changed again. We need our business office to help. They've got 1 week to finish out audit. All of these variables, I view this like a giant Rubik's Cube, are moving all the time. And so it's nice to have at least, again, a framework for these various levels, which will be different for every charity. But at some point, this is the theme of the whole slide, at some point your charity might say, if I'm thinking about the pool, I'm okay in the waiting end, I'm okay going a little bit out, I'm okay going maybe to a level 4. But for our capacity, the time of year, the personnel that we'd need to be able to deploy on this fairly quickly, if it's a short time frame as an example, our organizational risk tolerance, maybe go into a 5, we're starting to bite our lip and hold our nose. And maybe because we're doing that, we're going to have 4 more gift acceptance committee meetings to make sure it's okay, which now means this is like a 2.5 or 3 month process. You're just sucking all kinds of political and social capital there. Never mind trying to keep the donor at bay, going, why is this taking so long? Can't you guys just take this thing? You're making this very difficult. You got all that kind of going on. So the point is, in my view, you should not outsource anything that you're comfortable taking in if it's sort of big, clean, and quick, or you've got a lot of expertise and time. Sort of the Rubik's Cube sort of lines up well on that particular situation. And then there might be a level 4. Maybe it's a level 7. I don't know. But for your organization to say, yeah, once it goes to that level or beyond, we need to now find sort of an outsource partner for that. That's the whole theme of this. It's not outsourcing's great, outsource everything. That doesn't make any sense. Or don't outsource anything. Look at all the bad stuff that can happen. That doesn't make any sense. It's each organization determining what its comfort level is for these generally types of opportunities that donors present. So that's it. Let me just sort of jump to the next one. We'll go through a couple slides, and then we'll get to that top 10. I hope to have about 10 minutes or so at the end for questions, too. I normally like taking questions as I go, but since I'm the only one doing this, we're going to take them at the end, and hopefully, again, my team can jump in as needed. So what's an overview specific to planned giving? And planned giving, again, I would say is not just testamentary gifts, sort of any kind of lifetime or testamentary gift, life income gift, of course. And so you have both the gift itself outsourcing. Why would you outsource the gift? You see, too risky, too complex, too time intensive. Maybe there's some tax issues, longer holding period, super short decision time, which is sort of the time intensive piece, or costly if you're not actually having the vehicle. So maybe that's gift annuities, and you're going to do 1 or 2 a year in California. Well, you're like, do I really want to go through all of that to make that happen? Maybe it's an S corporation stock that comes up. And you're like, we don't have a structure to be able to mitigate perhaps some of the unrelated business taxable income that might come out of that. So that's, from a costly standpoint, not going to be a good, efficient way for us to take that particular gift in. Maybe it's that real estate with that same board chair on the third green, but the board chair said, hey, good news is there's demand all over the place. Bad news is I got to get this thing done like in a week because I've got people all over this trying to put this into a purchase and sale contract. I'm getting ready to, I don't know, go to Europe for a month, and I want to have this sort of done pretty quickly. Well, now that's different. So the point is you can outsource the gift if the vehicle is not offered directly to the donor or the process is not offered directly to the donor, then you can outsource it. Back to that continuum. Where are you comfortable? Where aren't you? Then to start potentially considering sort of outsourcing the rest. And then service. So we're talking about the gift of the vehicle, but there are also services that otherwise would be necessary. That would go to sort of a little bit, again, on the vendor agent side, but do you do internal administration or outsource the administration? So that's more the service necessary, sort of the appraisal pieces as an example, that are ancillary to the gift but are required or a component of making sure that it's compliant and that it actually occurs. So here, what I call, this is me, the top 5 outsourcing pros and cons. So we'll go to the cons first. This is just me. You might have some others. Love for you to put that in, ideally the Q&A side. Say, what about these others? I think these are cons. Fantastic. Throw them in the chat, whatever. So first one is reputational risk. Concern from the charity saying, look, if we, quote unquote, refer, I don't endorse, don't recommend, refer to some other party, any other party, that could be then a reputational risk back to us. Donor goes there, has a bad experience, and these happen with us, happen with everybody. Sometimes things don't work perfectly. That's just how life works. That could be a reputational risk to the organization. So that's certainly something that's important. 2, I say this with love, and I would put myself in here too, there's some level of ego going, I think I can do this. I want to be able to do this. Our organization positions itself as being super sophisticated, so it doesn't seem to align if we're super sophisticated that we can't do a level 3 or a 4 or a 5 or an 8 or a 10. I don't know. At what level is that appropriate? And that could be sort of at the personal level, but also sort of the ego reputation, if you will, organizationally for the process and the control of the process. This is a con. In essence, this is extreme. I don't know how to do this. This other group does. So right there, that gets a little bit weird. And whatever they're doing, I don't have my hands anywhere around that steering wheel. I'm not even a passenger in the car. And so I'm just hoping that that process is going to go well and go smoothly, but we have no control over what that experience is. Now, I'll also say, I think it was Minnesota, I think it was because I always use this as an example, is if you ask people how they drive in Minnesota, everybody says above average. We're all above average drivers. So that's the counter is maybe like, well, we want to have control of the process. Do you? That's a different question. You get the point. It's kind of like I'm afraid that I'm on an airplane because I'm not actually the one with the yoke, but do I want to be the one that? No, I do not want to be that person. So you got to trick your brain there a little bit sometimes. Direct and indirect costs. So clearly, if there's a cost in outsourcing, that group is charging what they believe to be a reasonable fee and that you and or the donor think is a reasonable fee, or you won't do it. So, but there's a cost. And so there's also indirect cost to outsourcing. So I always love when I hear what I'd call an amateur or a newbie real estate investor, and they would say, oh, well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy 4 or 5 rental properties, and then I'm just going to hire a property manager. And then that's it. And then it's all passive. I go away and all these checks just appear in the mail. And I said, if you hire a property manager, now your job is to manage the property manager. That just doesn't poof away. Same thing with outsource. Is there due diligence on the outsource provider? That's a whole other question. I had a conversation for 30 minutes today with the university thinking about using us for something. May or may not work. And she's like, well, what do we do? Do we look at your audited stuff? I was like, I don't know what you do. The more you start to vet an outsource partner, actually the higher the risk is, because now it looks like you're actually vetting and somehow endorsing or recommending, which you should not be doing at all. The flip side is they're saying, well, that doesn't seem logical. We don't want to refer our donor to an outside group unless we sort of know something about that outside group. That doesn't seem right either. So there is this sort of level of due diligence, how much, how little, and then also the management of that. Well, then what? We've had some of our other partners ask us, and we've done, which is painful, these information security stuff. Where's the stuff stored and all. I mean, it's like a gauntlet, like major, process report for them to feel comfortable then actually referring. These are financial services institutions, but referring other of their clients sort of over. So there's a process. So even though you're not doing it, you're still having these indirect costs as well. So it's just important to understand. You can't say like my real estate investor, I'll just engage the property manager and then poof, everything just goes away. It doesn't just poof go away. There's still internal time to manage the process. And then sort of the relationship control of the relationship. So there's the control of the process of the facilitation of the gift itself, but there's also the relationship. And then also, how is it sort of handed off? How is the baton passed from the sort of referring charity to whoever this outsourced partner may be? And sort of what is the noise around that? The donor's like, look, I graduated from you in 1984, and now there's this other group, and who is this other group, and what? So it just kind of creates sometimes more mentally than reality, but can create certainly some noise. You're adding another group in some way into the mix. We all know, one-to-one's, confusing enough in terms of communication. Let's throw another third group into it. Can sometimes add some additional turbulence. And then, which I think is an interesting one, and I think very valid to some extent, is sort of the loss of the internal staff training. So if you outsource, we'll pick on real estate. We never do real estate ever, no matter what. Well, okay, but then your staff will never build up the internal expertise to deal with real estate. So you're kind of making the decision of, we're never going to get into that, or it will be a long time, and then we'll have to sort of ease back into the pool to build up our capacity. Now let me talk about the other side of that. This is still a con, clearly a con. The other side of that is, well, okay, you've got your staff. Oh, now the person's getting trained. Now they're doing better and better. And now, let's be blunt, what is the average tenure for most development staff? Isn't it like 1.6 years? I think that's right. We'll say for gift planning staff, probably 2.5, 3 years, maybe. That's on a good day. So, okay, you build that up, then that person leaves, and then it all leaves as well. So there's sort of that is the other side. I'm not saying that should overrule it, but that's another consideration. And the other piece, too, is you have to have a ton of reps in this space. I want to know more about real estate. Well, okay. Is it encumbered? Is it international? Is it domestic? Does it have a tenant? Is it commercial? Is it triple net lease? I can come up with minimum 30 different permutations of what real estate looks like. And I always love when most gift acceptance policies, because you have to, will have like, here are the one or two of the 30. If you have all 30, the thing would be 800 pages. It's ridiculous. It's non-usable, so I'm not suggesting you should do that. But I would also say, once we do 3 or 4 real estate transactions, then we're going to be more comfortable. No, you won't. You'll have 3 or 4 completely distinct, different real estate transactions, and the fourth one that come up will be different than the other 4 anyway. So even for us, and others like us, we have evil competitors, and they're fantastic. So lots of groups do this. Lots of groups do this. The point is that, as I mentioned, we did 261 donations last year. It was 1,900 referrals. So it's 8 to 10 referrals on average a day, roughly, that are coming in. So we're getting 8 to 10 reps every single day. That's a different level of, swinging the bat, if you will, than most charities might be getting 2 or 3 of these reps a year. So it's just hard to get that momentum to remember what was the case that was similar, which was different 3 months ago. Not saying this is a pro. I'm just saying that's sort of the opposite of not being able to build up internal staff training. But this is completely a con. You're not going to be able to build that up internally, which I think very much is important to note. So what are the pros? I've sort of talked about this already, so I'll whip through these pretty fast. Yes, you could have reputational risk if something goes poorly, but let's hope it doesn't. And you have reputational enhancement if it goes well. And potentially reduced political relationship capital. So what does that mean? You know what that means. So if you're a major gift officer and you're like, please don't bring up real estate, please don't bring up, oh God, they brought up real estate. All right, so now I've got to go back to my manager, who's now got to go to the business office, to have the CFO who's now involved, and now they give me this real estate due diligence checklist. Now I have to coordinate and plan, I don't know, and take minutes for the gift acceptance committee meeting, and we get that to a final form, we get that to a memo, and then that memo goes over to the CFO. I know, CFO, you're doing the audit, but boy, we really need to have this put all that away. This is a higher priority. This is a big donor. Please don't mess up the relationship. Okay, once you get that done, that goes to internal counsel. That internal counsel goes to external counsel. External counsel goes back to internal counsel. If you have all followed that bouncing ball, that can be a process. And one little link in that chain can be challenging. So there's a lot of internal management selling that's involved to lubricate that process as much as you can. That gets back to the political or relationship capital. Versus, this is the pro side, versus saying, I don't want to do any of that. For this thing, to just send it over there, let them do all that, and now there's not a discussion, like an email to any of those people I just mentioned, and now that major gift officer is able to move on to the next call that afternoon to ask for a large capital campaign gift. So that's sort of the reduced political relationship capital internally, but was externally too with the donor, because now hopefully that can move quicker and so forth. May not, but that's at least the potential pro. Less staff training required if you've got the outside people. So now that person leaves after 2.5 years, it doesn't matter. You have sort of have a core, group or team that's sort of doing this stuff anyway. So you have sort of in essence, the bench is always available to sort of plug into with that expertise. And they could be more the relationship managers. I call those the bush shakers. So at least for our firm, again, just speaking for us, lots of others like us, but we have issues of helping charities, because we're not good at this at all, sort of the marketing, communication, how do you get people excited about it to sort of qualify them to even have the discussion. What we always say is, just shake the bushes like crazy. Whatever falls out of the bushes, we can hook them, reel them in, fillet them, and cook them. We're good at it. We can do that all day long. We're not good at, where do you put the boat, what lure to use? That's not us. So these can be more the relationship managers identifying opportunities as bird dogs and then being able to sort of pitch that back and over for those continuum cases that may not be a good fit. Reduced actual and opportunity costs. So again, at least for us on big ones, there's some were higher fees than this, but at least on average, it's about 1.35%. It's on a big number, so nominally that's a big number too. I'm not sugarcoating that. But the point is that for some donors and some in particular charities, they would say 1.35%, even if it's 3%, which is sort of our maximum fee. Even at that level, people would say, we're burning that up internally. If you take all of our staff time, benefits, overhead from all these people that we're involved with, forget even the hard dollar cost of potentially external counsel, external vendors, et cetera. That's not everybody, but it's generally reduced actual and opportunity costs. Also to say that major gift officer that's not having to morally sway the CFO to drop the audit stuff and work on this stuff to keep it going. In the case, rather than having that for, an hour, making all this up, they can instead go out and have another call with another major gift donor. So you have sort of the opportunity costs of all this as a consideration. None of these overrule any of the others. These are just sort of the Rubik's Cube of considerations that I think charities should be thoughtful about. The other is speed, and so for most of these, speed is a big issue to capture gifts otherwise that wouldn't. And I should have actually put on here, pro didn't even think about it, a con may be, of all these things, you may not even take the gift anyway, so it might be declined anyway. Forget whether it's outsourced or not. So in this case, you'd actually say, if we didn't do it, then we'd lose the gift entirely. If we are able to outsource it, maybe that gift could otherwise be captured. So because of, in many cases, the speed. And so, for again, many are like us too, but generally, and I've got some of the team on here too, so they might go, stop saying that, but it's about right. Generally, about 3, 4, 5 business days or so for the point the donor says, yes, I want to move forward on a business interest gift, as an example, and usually sort of that 5 to maybe 10 business days, sort of point to point, all the way through to gift completion on real estate. Both of those can happen faster, and they have. Russ Willis did one, and it was actually same day on a business interest gift last year. We're not looking for that, by the way. But the key is around speed and being able to capture gifts otherwise that maybe would not be. And then the big one, at least from a CFO perspective, in many cases from the board perspective, is, well, wait a minute, if they're not, again, in this case, a vendor or agent, we're basically just saying, somebody else do the whole thing, just send us back whatever's, left at the end. Then, of course, they're not on chain of title. They're not doing the fun, audit, FASB, 8283, compliance, risk, all that stuff goes away. And so in that case, they're saying, look, if there's no risk, otherwise we really don't want to take it, don't have capacity, that's where that can otherwise be outsourced, depending on the level of the continuum. So I think that's it on those. So we're going to jump into the directory. So pretty good on time. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. And so big disclaimers. So first thing is here too, these certain situations or gifts that come up that we even look at and say, maybe there's some other ways of getting it done. This is just a sampling. This is not exhaustive either. Certainly the directory itself is not exhaustive at all. It's a starting point, not considered no one vetted. I wouldn't recommend my mother, which is true on a couple levels. No, I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm hopeful that you'll see sort of this extreme, no outsource everything is a little nutty. Said that like 3 or 4 times. Well, then where do you make this triage decision about what level of comfort based on the situation? That's the Rubik's Cube thing. Then these top 5 pros and cons, how does that fit within the charity or perhaps with a client that you're working with as a professional advisor? And then what are just some examples of situations that might come up that otherwise may be conducive for outsourcing if that decision is even made? So just a starting point for due diligence. If I get a call from somebody, I'm going to go nuts. And they're going to say, oh, you did slide number 12. We called them and they were horrible. Well, whatever, that's your fault. So do your own due diligence. Again, these are free webinars. Don't sue us. There you go. And then there are lots of conflicts that we have. I put those with asterisks. Just consider everything's a conflict. That's what I would do to make it easy. So I'll just sort of jump through. So what if you had a donor or what if you had a client? And they say, we want to be able to make a gift to a charity. And if we made the gift to the charity, but we'd like to be able to control, not control, but control, advise, recommend, wish, suggest, the amount of grants that are going out, the timing as to when it goes out, but we need a deduction today, and the anonymity of the grants. And seriously, out of 1.4 million charities, how many have donor-advised funds? The answer is 1,000. 1,000 out of 1.4 million. That's dinky-dinky. So for the other 99% that don't have donor-advised funds, they might say, well, I don't know. We could create a donor-advised fund, and we could do this, and we could do a private label, but we're not going to have many people doing this. I'm sorry, donor. We don't do that. I'm so sorry. So, no, that's a declination. No. You can say, we don't do that, but there are some groups that do. Community foundations, religious foundations, like National Christian Foundation, Barnabas, all these groups, Jewish Federation, all these different groups from religious universities now more and more are having them. Then you've got the national funds, Fidelity, Schwab, and a bunch of other great national donor-advised funds. So all of those groups, you might say, yeah, we can't do that, or maybe my client, I'm sorry, we don't have a platform necessarily to do it, but here's a place that you could do that. That's kind of outsourced. Again, not an agent or vendor relationship. You're just referring them over there to get this goal accomplished. And then you'd hope, if you're doing that as a charity, that they would say, thank you. This is exactly what I needed. Now I'm able to do these kind of gifts, and I'll make recommendations of some of those grants back to you for my giving. That's the hope. So this isn't and I go crazy, this isn't a situation where the donor calls and said, these are my goals. He's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know, just go Google something. And you should, as a professional, I would suggest, you want to know what some of the options are out there objectively, and in as a neutral way as you possibly can, kind of the honest broker idea. So that's donor-advised funds. You get the gist. What if they called you and they said, hey, I've got somebody down my block. He needs an organ transplant. He's the nicest guy in the world, really fun on hard times. He's got 3 kids. I want to be able to make a charitable donation to him. You all should know that the IRS would deem that targeting, and therefore if you know the person that's going to otherwise benefit from the donation, then you cannot get a deduction for that. But there is one, there might be more, I have no idea, but there's one group, this is a spinoff from the National Christian Foundation called Helping Hands Ministries. I'm not endorsing anybody. But you can call them and you can say, hey, Helping Hand Ministries, I have this person down the block, seems to be very much in need, They do an independent review, due diligence to their extent, to pre-approve a project or the situation. Say, yes, we have vetted this person is of need. They basically put that on their website, kind of create a little mini fund, almost like a charitable GoFundMe bucket. And then at that point, you and anybody else could make donations to that charity that then would otherwise make those grants. I wouldn't want them speaking on my behalf. I might have missed a couple facts there, but that's the gist. So you're like, oh, how does that work? Call them, go on their website, do whatever you want. But that's an example of a situation that might come up to say, this is something we do not want to do for all kinds of tax reasons, but I understand what you're trying to accomplish, and here's a group otherwise that might be able to help. This question used to come up like once a month for us. So there's a potential outsourced solution. What if it's a non-cash gift? You already know that's what we do. What if you're going to decline it anyway through your gift acceptance? It's super risky. It's a super fast turnaround. It's going to be split with 6 other charities, and we like the other 5 charities, but we don't want to be the one taking on all the work, so we'd rather just have this outsourced. Tons of community foundations do this. We do this, super asterisk there. National Christian Foundation does a lot of this type of work. Large donor advised fund sponsors certainly do these. National donor advised funds, Realty Gift Fund is in this space. Other groups do it. This is not an exhaustive list. I've got to say that like 5 times. But it's exhaustive enough that you can say, oh, we wouldn't have to decline this gift. We can call our local community foundation and see if they might be able to help facilitate this or support this donation, or a donor advised fund or a religious foundation. So a number of ways to be able to outsource to the extent that it exceeds your risk comfort on the continuum to other organizations. We live in an unbelievably specialized world, and it is very depressing to me, but this is true. I'll tell you the truth. When I wake up, anything I think I'm like, oh, I wonder how that would work. I'm depressed knowing, I bet somebody's already figured that out. It's wonderful. Somebody's already figured out like 90% of the situations that come up, something already exists. You just have to be the one to type the right stuff into Google to find out what that thing is. That I hate to say that's sort of life now, but it kind of is. Same thing here. So that's non-cash assets. What about free, maybe I should put that in quotes, CRT drafting? I'm not suggesting that's a good thing. I'm just suggesting that this comes up from time to time with a donor going, I don't want to pay the attorney, but charity, I'm giving it to you anyway. I want you to be the trustee anyway. What do you mean I got to go out and have to pay all this money to have another CRT drafted? I think it's a great idea to have them pay that money to have their own counsel to draft the CRT. But there are some IRS specimen documents that need some pretty heavy revisions, frankly, that they put out to say, here are sort of the safe harbor documents, if you will, and you can make some slight adjustments. And there are some charities, we do some moves around the edges too, but some community foundations would say, if we are the trustee, then this is our standard or somewhat standard CRT document for us to be comfortable as trustee. Same thing with religious foundations, same thing with universities. Usually there's some policy to say at least 51% or maybe it's 100% of the remainder has to come back to us, some level of percentage, to make it all worthwhile to create the CRT, trustee, administer, investment management, and so forth. So the point is that this is possible to sort of come up in that sort of an outsourced model. I might be a small local charity. They come in and they say, hey, I want to be able to do a CRT with you, but I'm just not going to pay for the additional money. Even if this is done, there should be like a triple attestation that's like, we've told you to take it to your advisor. Please take it to your attorney to at least review this in light of your situation, like imploring them to do that, or lots of disclaimers as to why they don't want to. But you get the point. So some of these organizations are able and willing to do that. International grants. This is coming up more and more. Your donor might come in and say, look, I went on a trip and I was in England and I saw Oxford University, and boy, it's a great university, and we'll imagine that they don't have a U.S. Friends of group, which they do, but we'll just imagine that they don't, that there are many community foundations or other large donor advised fund sponsors that say, it's Oxford, kind of like Harvard. Okay, we'll make a grant over there from an equivalency determination. That's pretty easy. They're kind of like what our U.S. charity would be. Versus I was over in Asia, I went to Vietnam, I visited a small orphanage, love the work that they're doing, small amount can have a huge impact. I want to be able to make a grant there. Hey, charity, can you help me do that? And you might go, that's not something and we really want to jump up and down. But there's this group called Give to Asia. I wonder where they give to. Love the name. And they are a 501c3 public U.S. charity that does nothing but give to Asia. So then they would do the vetting, but equivalency determination as appropriate on their end. So it could be a grant to them getting the U.S. deduction, or they may have a private foundation or donor advised fund that they make a grant over to give to Asia that then is granted out. So that's sort of outsourcing the international grant component that some donors otherwise may have. Next is the charitable trustee. So it's not just the drafting of the trust, it's will you serve as trustee? Now, in many situations, it might be most appropriate for them to use their own financial institution to do that on lots of reasons. But for whatever reason, they might come out and say, oh, I don't want to do that. Then they might be appropriate for them to self-trustee, which many donors do, of course, which would be fine. Some donors don't want to do that, or they do that when they're 60 to 70. Now they're 78 going, I don't want to trustee this anymore. How about we can do this with a community foundation that might otherwise serve as trustee? Some do, some don't. If they don't, they can outsource that function. If they do, then they can do that function. Religious foundations, universities, and we do that as well. Outsourcing the CGA program. So as you probably saw if you were on when I talked about the National Gift Community Foundation, that's what it does. So if the charity doesn't offer them at all, that's the no program, or maybe one comes up with real estate or S-Corp stock or cryptocurrency. We've been threatened 3 times to do them with cryptocurrency. Haven't done one yet, but could. Or in a particular, we'll call them a problematic state for whatever reason they don't want to register, or for multiple charities. I want to do a $50,000 gift annuity, but I want it to 5 different charities. So that's something, again, that many charities would not otherwise take on, but many community foundations do this type of work. We do that through National Gift Annuity Foundation. Our Decami Foundation or Decami Asset Trust might be involved if it's an S-Corp or some other kind of more risky, complex asset, which we do as well. So the point is that can outsource some or all, kind of like that continuum. We'll take in all these in Texas because we're here in Texas. We got Texas covered, no problem. But every other year we get this call from a great donor in New York. We're just not going to do that. We're going to decline that. You don't need to decline that. You can maybe find a New York Community Foundation or National Gift Community Foundation or some other outsource partner to be able to take that on. Outsourcing bequest processing. So some would say, look, we've got an administrative assistant. They're handling all this, no problem. Simple estates come in. Simple estates are simple, and then they're not simple. And then so all of a sudden they might say, wait a minute, we ran across this one estate much more complicated, or maybe we have so much volume coming in it's very hard for us to manage, or it gets back to Mary's unbelievable with this, but now she's out for a while, or she left, God forbid, and now what do we do? So more and more, we're seeing sort of outsourcing. Holland & Knight has a big practice in this area. Chisholm Kilpatrick does a lot of speaking, sponsors CGP, National, sort of in this area, Pulcinelli. I'm sure there are others. This is not an exhaustive list, but just know that this is available. One of the funniest lines I ever heard was she said, Brian, estate settlement, especially for charitable estate settlement, is a lot like a kindergarten class. If the teacher is not in the room, bad things start to happen really fast. And so they said sometimes having like an attorney representative, or would say a firm, forceful representative, even if it's internal to the charity, needs to be present, because we hear story after story after story of, look, it's the daughter who's the executor, maybe she really didn't like the mom anyway, now she feels this is a huge burden. What do you mean? The charity's involved. Wait, that was supposed to be my inheritance. Wait, charity, you're telling me to list the real estate and sell it? You list it and sell it. I don't want to do that. You ought to be happy with whatever you get at the end, might be said or unsaid, and now all of a sudden they need to maybe have some right sizing of, we have a beneficial interest in the estate to the exact same extent that you do. And so we need to make sure that our interests are represented appropriately. So again, we don't do this too much, but these are some firms that do a lot more. Number 9, what if it's a tax situation? So UBIT, so generally coming out from an S-Corp gift or from an LLC active business gift. These are all just examples, as you see, and I've got 10. I could come up with 30. These are just 10 that come up a fair amount, but the charity might say, we could take this. We have all the internal capacity to do it and expertise, but the issue now becomes is we're not able to mitigate the tax. So National Christian Foundation has a trust that do it. We do a lot in this space, Fidelity Charitable, and a number of community foundations have trust-formed charities to be able to mitigate that UBIT that otherwise would come up from S-Corp or other UBIT-type assets. And finally, so it might be worth saying, we're just going to outsource the whole plan giving function totally, or a big chunk of it. So you know many of these firms, so Thompson Associates, very successful, Heaton Smith, very successful, Eddie Thompson obviously running that, Dave Smith, Joe Tumalo at Major Plan Giving Development, sort of a smaller shop, but the same thing, sort of an embedded, plan giving person or consultant, and then a bunch of others. So this is more outsourcing the actual function of plan giving. So that's certainly happening more and more as well, at least, again, sort of a certain extent. And so that's it. I think I only have maybe 1 or 2 minutes at all. So a couple things. So these are all the webinars that we have. This will, again, be posted on our website. And so I'm sorry to get some of the questions, but just put them in now, and I promise you I will do a compilation of the questions from Tuesday, the ones from today, and then we'll include those as a link, what comes out. And that will also, by the way, all the past webinars also have the Q&A compilation from every single one of those are on the Charitable Solutions website for this at that link. So I hope this has been helpful. Big theme. If you're outsourcing everything all the time, don't do that, or reconsider that in light of this. If you're never outsourcing, I would respectfully submit you should reconsider that. At what level do you sort of massage that down a little bit? But hopefully some of this gives you the framework, like with the continuum, some of the pros and cons, and then some of the specific examples about where it might come up. Because the goal here is to be the best service to your clients as a professional advisor and obviously to your donors. And the way to do that, in my view, is to be objective, that honest broker, and helping to really understand what they're trying to do, and then to be honest about these are things that we can do really, really well, and here are things that we won't do really, really well, and let's find some other group that this is their sweet spot. So with that, thank you so much. I hope it's helpful, and best of luck the rest of the week. Have a great holiday. Bye-bye.